Welcome to my channel stories about relationships, infidelity, disappointment, and surprise, as well as joy and love. I hope you will enjoy listening, discussing the wrong actions of the characters. Enjoy listening. I will ask you to subscribe to my channel. It will not be difficult for you, but it is pleasant for me. Natalia was visibly nervous as he walked towards her. His broad figure dwarfed her petite body as he came closer. The front door had recently closed behind her husband, and they were left alone with Gonzalez. Now it was just the two of them. Natalia felt excited looking at him. She couldn't control her emotions and tried to hide her anxiety by standing still. Gonzalez was looking at her intently. His confidence was felt in every movement, and Natalia felt the growing tension. He tried to calm her down by saying, "Don't worry, everything will be fine." She responded with a nervous smile. The conversation between them continued, and Natalia was trying to figure out what was going on at that moment. "Do you think this is all normal?" she asked Gonzalez. "Are you used to doing this?" Gonzalez smiled. "We have nothing to worry about, do we?" he said calmly, and Natalia smiled again, albeit nervously. They continued to talk, and Natalia felt her inner contradictions begin to weaken. At some point, it became clear to her that she had to make decisions on her own, despite the presence of Gonzalez. She stopped on the threshold and looked back at him one more time before leaving. It has been more than 3 months since the night when Natasha and her husband Gennady decided to watch the movie. After a few years of marriage, they both realized that sometimes you need something new to bring variety to a relationship. The couple lived together for several years before the wedding, and their life together had been going on for 9 years. At Natalia's recent birthday party, one of the guests brought unusual films that they watched after the others left. Natasha found that the scenes in these films evoke unexpected emotions in her. These were bright moments that she had never experienced before. After that, Gennady began to find and download similar films from the internet, and they watched them together, discussing what they saw. Natasha was aware that some moments attracted her, but they were only part of the acting productions. The movie they saw recently was different. It was filmed without a production, and this caused even more surprise. The woman in the frame was ordinary, and the scene looked like real life. Natasha felt that this had awakened something new in her, and she was thinking about how her own life could change. As they sat on the couch and discussed the film, Gennady shared his thoughts on how diversity could improve their relationship. This led to a frank conversation where they opened up to each other and discussed their fantasies. Natasha was thinking about how she could realize her desires, and fantasies began to occupy her thoughts more and more often. A few weeks later, one evening Natasha came into the kitchen and saw Gennady sitting at his laptop. "What are you doing?" "What is it?" she asked him. "I found something that might interest you," he replied, smiling. Gennady explained that he had found a dating site where he met an interesting person. His name was Gonzalez, and he was a medical student who came to St. Petersburg to study. "He's studying to be a doctor," Gennady added, showing her photo on the screen. Natasha looked at the photo and thought about it. Gonzalez looked confident and serious, which intrigued her. "It looks like it might be interesting," she said, trying to figure out what this acquaintance might lead to. Natalia was visibly worried when he approached her. His tall figure stood in front of her. The two of them were left alone. Natasha could feel the tension in the air, but she didn't know what to do at that moment. "Don't worry, everything will be fine," Gonzalez said with a smile. Natasha replied with a slight smile, trying to hide her nervousness. The situation was not easy for her. "Do you really think this is the right thing to do?" Natasha asked, trying to find the words. Gonzalez looked at her confidently. He took his time, just watching her reaction. "Don't worry, everything will be fine," he said, trying to calm her down. A few seconds of silence filled the room. Natasha tried to collect her thoughts. Their recent conversations on the subject had raised a lot of questions, and she wasn't sure where it all might lead. It has been several months since Natasha and her husband Gennady decided to diversify their family life. They discussed various possibilities a lot, how to make their relationship more interesting and exciting. At one of the recent parties, which was held in honor of her birthday, they were introduced to new ideas for them. One of the friends offered them unusual subjects to discuss. It was something new, something that could add new emotions to their family life. Later, Gennady began to select different films and programs that they could watch together. These materials allowed them to openly discuss their thoughts and dreams, making their relationship closer. Natasha felt that it helped them to become more open with each other. However, one day Gennady unexpectedly informed Natasha that he had met a new man named Gonzalez. It was a student who was studying to be a doctor in their city. They started talking about possible meetings and how to diversify their communication. His name is Gonzalez, Gennady said, showing Natasha a photo of this man on the laptop screen. Gonzalez was tall, with a confident look. He impressed Natasha with his appearance and manner of communication. She thought about her husband's proposal for a long time. A few days later, Gennady handed her the phone. "Gonzalez wants to talk to you," he said. Natasha picked up the phone and started a conversation with Gonzalez. He asked her questions, which she tried to answer honestly, but with restraint. "Are you sure this is what you want?" he asked her. "Yes," Natasha replied, trying to hide her uncertainty. This conversation helped Natasha better understand what she really wants from their communication. She knew that this was a step into the new and unknown, but at the same time she felt her husband's support. A few days later, Natasha and Gennady discussed everything again to make sure that they were both ready for this. They came to a common agreement, and Natasha was determined to move forward. After their conversation ended, she went and talked to her husband, and after a few minutes undressed and sat down in an armchair. An hour later, Gonzalez called her again. "Thank you, Natasha. You turned me on. I'm thinking about you," Gonzalez added. It had been a long time since Gennady had talked dirty to her, and she had never talked to a stranger before, so intimately. When he called her a few days later, Gonzalez asked her what she liked to do in bed, and she found herself telling him about her innermost desires. Gonzalez listened quietly and attentively, and when Natasha finished, he spoke. "You want me to own you, don't you, Natasha?" "Yes," replied Natasha. "Do you still let your husband satisfy you?" Gonzalez asked her directly. "Of course," Natasha replied. "I want you to stop with him. It belongs to me now, and only for me," Gonzalez told her. Natasha agreed without hesitation. When Gonzalez told her, butterflies fluttered deep inside her. She had visions of him coming up to her and demanding what belonged to him, tearing his clothes. He tore off her underwear to take what belonged to him. When Natasha told Gennady that Gonzalez did not want him to satisfy her again, there were no objections from her husband, just a resigned acceptance of the situation. Natasha was pleased because the last thing she wanted was for Gennady to change his mind and break off her relationship with Gonzalez. Gonzalez was also pleased when she told him that her husband was no longer sleeping with her. "That's sweet, baby," Gonzalez said. "Now you're going to be a hot girl for me." Natasha smiled to herself and then listened intently as Gonzalez suddenly told her to take off her panties. "I want you to touch yourself, baby," Gonzalez told her. She obeyed. Natasha closed her eyes, listening to his soft voice telling her what he was going to do to her. At first, Gonzalez told Natasha very little about himself during their phone conversations, but one evening he told her that he was still in a relationship with 19 couples. Gonzalez said that he began to be interested in white girls when he was 14 and has continued to be interested in him over the past years. He had long-term relationships with some couples, two of whom he had known for more than 5 years. But most of all, she was shocked by the fact that 8 women had given birth to children by him. 2 women gave birth to him, 2 children each, and another was going to give birth to his 3rd child. Natasha asked Gonzalez if their husbands had agreed to their wives getting pregnant from him, and he told her that only 2 of them did not know in advance that their wives intended to get pregnant from him. "It seems like you enjoyed making babies for women?" Natasha told him when he told her about it. "Of course," Gonzalez replied. "Making love is always better when you're having a baby." "Did you tell them to stop taking the pills?" Natasha asked. "No," he told her. "I would never advise a woman to do this, but I asked them. If I like them, then I will always ask." Gonzalez added. "There was no pressure on women. It was their decision. Anyway, I always go without elastic bands." 3 of them risked making regular love without taking precautions, and the rest stopped taking pills when I asked them to do it. "Without elastic bands?" "Making love without elastic bands," Gonzalez explained. Natasha was silent for a few moments. Don't you have any children yet, Natasha? Gonzalez asked. No, Natasha replied. Somehow it doesn't work out with my husband to conceive a child. Of course, would you like to conceive a child with me? Gonzalez asked. His words sent chills down Natasha's spine. That would be worth doing, Natasha. I could never have done that. Natasha told him. Why? Gonzalez asked her. In this, there is nothing racial. Natasha told him. It's just that not my family, not my friends, will understand me about the birth of a black child. Natasha explained. I understand you, Natasha. Gonzalez told her. I know a white woman has to give birth from a white man. Of course. Natasha told him. But I know that deep down you want to be with a child. Gonzalez told her. I've been doing this for a long time, baby, and I know how a woman feels underneath me. Natasha didn't say anything. It wouldn't take me long either, baby, Gonzalez said, interrupting her thoughts. I usually impregnate women pretty well. In fact, I attach great importance to this. Natasha was silent. She was scared now. He's not afraid for Gonzalez. He's afraid for himself. She was afraid that she wouldn't let him do it. Maybe you should think about the baby, Gonzalez asked. I'll come to you and spend 3 or 4 days trying to get you to have a baby from me. After that conversation, Gonzalez waited almost a week before calling her again. Natasha knew that he was deliberately letting her chew everything over in her mind. Of course, she told her husband about their conversation. Gennady was shocked, but there were no strong objections on his part. He just told her that she shouldn't do this. There was no conviction in his voice, and she wondered if he looked like her and enjoyed being influenced by Gonzalez. When Gonzalez did call, he told Natasha that he was seriously thinking about coming to her. Natasha was pleased and told him about it. Does it depend on how much of yourself you're going to give me, Natasha? What do you mean? Natasha asked. I think you know what I mean, baby. She did so. That's a lot to ask of a woman, Gonzalez. She responded. I know, but I have something you want, something you need, baby. Natasha was silent for a few moments. When is your next cycle? Gonzalez asked. In a week, Natasha replied. So can I assume that you won't resume contraception after that? Gonzalez asked. Of course. Firstly, Natasha was too nervous, and secondly, she had to put the finishing touches on the house. Gennady's belongings were moved from the bedroom to the spare room. Gonzalez insisted that the marital bedroom belonged to them for the duration of his stay with her. There was another reason, and probably the most important one. She didn't really want her husband to leave. She knew that when Gonzalez walked through the door, their lives would change forever. She hoped that Gennady would change his mind and stop her, saving himself from himself. Natasha could no longer resist Gonzalez's attraction, but Gennady could. My husband had the opportunity to put an end to all this. When Gennady walked through the door some time later with Gonzalez, Natasha felt sad, but at the same time there was excitement that she could hardly contain. She nervously kissed Gonzalez, greeting him for the first time. Nice to finally meet you, he told her as Gennady carried his suitcase into the bedroom before joining them for coffee in the kitchen. They chatted for a while, mostly about Gonzalez and his homeland Cuba, before Gonzalez glanced at his watch and then at Gennady. I think Natasha and I could use some time together, Gennady, Gonzalez told him. Gennady also looked at his watch. Yes, it's 2 o'clock. I have to go back to work. When Gennady stood up, Gonzalez suddenly reached for Natasha's hand and began to take off her wedding ring. I think it would be better if it was taken off, said Gonzalez, handing it to Gennady. Natasha smiled nervously as Gennady took her wedding ring and put it in his jacket pocket. He had her almost completely now. When Gennady headed for the front door, Gonzalez followed him. Natasha smiled again. It was almost as if he was escorting her husband out of the house. Natasha felt herself trembling as Gonzalez closed the front door of the apartment behind them. Her heart was racing as he put his hands on her shoulders again and bent down to kiss her. He didn't say anything, but reached for the buttons of her blouse and began to unbutton them. Natasha silently looked down while her blouse was unbuttoned, button by button. When the latter was undone, he took it off her shoulders and threw it on the bed before reaching his hands behind her back to undo her bra. She stood silently while he threw her bra on the bed, and then reached for the zipper on her skirt. She stood silently while Gonzalez threw her bra onto the bed, and then reached for the zipper on her skirt. Gonzalez looked into her eyes for a moment, and then knelt down. He stood up, put his hands on her shoulders, and pressed down. Natasha had already started to kneel down when Gonzalez said these words. "Come on, Natasha. Show me your appreciation." Natasha quickly recovered from their lovemaking and soon began to feel rested. Gonzalez, however, fell asleep, and she pulled the blanket over them both and snuggled up to him. She had already planned to get pregnant by Gonzalez. What he was saying was true. There was no turning back.